Hi, welcome to Introduction to Business. We are going to go over chapter 3 today, or just briefly over chapter 3 today, because for this week's meeting, I would like for our class to have some discussions after watching this lecture. So this week is all about ethics, about proper behavior, about following the law, about doing the right thing, about how to know if we're doing the right thing or not. I've picked some slides and changed them a little bit because I want to make this part rather brief, and I would like you guys to focus on the discussions when we meet this week. So I'm going to share my slides with you. Just give me a sec. Okay, here we go. So to start with, I wanted to share with you some dictionary definitions of ethics. So the first one is the discipline dealing with what is good and bad and with moral duty and obligation. Another one I found is the discipline concerned with what is morally good and bad and right and wrong. The term is also applied to any system or theory of moral values and principles. Another definition would be moral principles that govern a person's behavior or the conducting of an activity. And here's my definition: doing the right thing. Well, sounds very simple, right? But it's not always that simple, because sometimes we have conflicting ideas or parties that we are siding with. Sometimes we really have to examine it deeper, what is actually the right thing to do. However, I can tell you in my experience, most of the time people actually know what is the right thing to do. The problem is that they are not doing what's the right thing to do. So the more consciously we think about it, the more likely we're going to make the better choice. So let's look at your code of personal ethics. Here's a table that I got from the textbook. This is a good table to determine what we feel, how we feel about ethics, what is our personal code of conduct, and where did we learn our ethics from. So I want you to actually take a moment and think about this. So the questions to ask regarding your base character: what characteristics would others use to describe you? Would they use words such as honest, reliable, kind, aggressive, courageous, sneaky? Just think about it honestly, right? And write down some words that come to your mind. I'm going to wait for a moment here and allow you to write something down. Okay, the next topic we're going to examine about ourselves is our beliefs. What are some of the most important beliefs you hold and use to make decisions in your life? So here are some examples: nice guys finish last, hard work always pays off, we must stand for right against wrong. So you don't have to be super creative. Just the first thing that pops into your mind about a strong belief that you hold, just write that down. Doesn't matter if it sounds good or interesting, just one sentence, the first thing that comes to your mind about your beliefs and about the belief that helps you make decisions in life. Okay, so next we are going to examine the origin of our beliefs. Where did our beliefs come from? And what is your view of your character? And where does that come from, right? So some examples are family, religion, movies, personal experiences, people you admire, maybe your friends. So I'm going to give you a brief moment to write down where your personal beliefs came from. Okay, and next we're going to examine our behavior. How do your relationships affect your behavior? And your character and your beliefs, right? Here are some examples. Somebody says they have mostly shallow relationships. They don't follow through with commitments. And another example is I have many deep, long-lasting friendships because I value friendship and work to take care of my friends. So just in general, your relationships and how they reflect on your character. Are you influenced by your friends a lot, or are you the one that stands out and is the one that will go the wrong direction if you feel that's, go the opposite direction if you feel that is what is necessary or what's the right thing to do. So I'm going to give you a moment to write down about that. Okay, now that we have examined our personal ethical principles and how we stand and what influences us, let's talk about personal ethics in business, right? So a lot of you are probably working, have part-time jobs, or some of you are even working full-time or have worked full-time in the past. So here are a few questions I wanted to ask. So one of them is, what if you are asked to act against your ethics? So this could be something as simple as your ethics say you shall never steal anything, unfairly take something from somebody else for your own benefit, right? So I think most of us hold that belief, right? So what if somebody asks you to steal something? Maybe that person has power over you. Maybe that person is your boss at work. Maybe that person is your spouse who has influence on you. So think about that. How would you react, right? The next one is, what if you unknowingly do something wrong? You accidentally did something wrong. Maybe you did something wrong in a report that you wrote at work, and you mixed up some numbers, or did something that has an impact on the business overall, or maybe even just on your department. What would you do? Would you try to cover it up? Would you blame someone else for it? Or would you talk to your boss about it and say, hey, sorry, I made this mistake, but I have a suggestion how we can correct it. So think about that. And what if you knowingly do something unethical or even illegal? Hopefully that will not happen, but what if? What if somebody convinced you to do something and you knew it was not legal, or you knew that's not the right thing to do, but you did it anyway? How would you feel afterwards? Would you feel good? Let's say you never got caught. Would you say, yeah, I did a great thing here, and would you repeat it? Or would your conscience tell you, well, yeah, that worked and I didn't get caught, but maybe I should not have done that? Okay, next we are going to talk about the company perspective. Companies are run by individuals, and decisions are made by individuals, and those decisions are affected by those individuals' ethical perspectives, right? So that's why I think both sides are important to cover in this class. So here are the things we're going to discuss briefly: corporate social responsibility, new markets, doing the right thing from the start, and ethical focus every day. I'm just going to go to the next slide because I have one slide for each of these topics. So new markets and ethical focus. Companies can actually make a conscious decision to enter new markets that have an ethical focus. For example, offering clean fuel. A lot of companies are putting research and development efforts into creating transportation that uses clean fuel, because clean fuel protects our environment, or should protect our environment if done properly, right? So that is one way companies can have an ethical focus by entering into a new market. I'm going to skip the medical vaccines for a second and just talk about fighting censorship. You know, there's a lot of censorship out there in different countries, especially, and a lot of companies are going global or are already global, such as Google. Google has had an ongoing issue with the market in China, because China has tremendous censorship on its citizens and what they can and cannot see on the internet. So we can discuss this at another time, or I can provide you some articles about that if you want to know more about it. But Google has been trying to fight censorship. Going green, you know, trying to eliminate waste, trying to use resources that are treating our planet properly, and so forth, right? The reason why I wanted to save the bullet creating medical vaccines for last is just because we are currently in this unusual situation with COVID-19, and companies are rushing to create a vaccine to help the situation and to have everybody globally go back to normal life as we knew it. There's a lot that can go wrong here and that can be unethical. We even had people that or governments that claimed they already have a vaccine. There's a lot that needs to be done with a vaccine. There's a lot of testing. You need clinical trials and all that. Some politicians are pushing companies to go ahead and put out the vaccine before they would typically put it out. This could be a problem where it might not be safe. So that's something that I hope we don't see a lot of unethical behavior. There's a lot of money to be made in this area as well. The company that comes out with a vaccine is probably going to be doing quite well. So that's another reason why they might be tempted to not follow proper procedures when it comes to vaccines. Any examples, any other examples you can think of? Maybe we can talk about that in our discussions later. Okay, another thing companies can do is to start ethically from the very beginning. We see the logo here of Starbucks, and Starbucks has been known to be one of the more ethical companies, although they have had some problems as well because they grew so large, so fast. But in general, they tried to focus on ethical business practices. Some of the things that companies can do is they can incorporate steps to make sure employees get off to an ethical start. So when they start working somewhere, there will be a code of ethics that will be shared with employees, you know, like such as what is okay, what's acceptable behavior, what the company stands for, and so forth. So what the company stands for is really evident in its mission statement, right? The mission statement kind of says what the company stands for. Some mission statements could be, they're very short. They could be things like don't be evil. Google uses that, although that's not their full mission statement. Some police departments use the mission statement to serve and protect. Why do they exist, right? That's kind of, and how do they operate in a very brief sentence or two. Orientation programs for new employees, right? Those are very, very important. So employees from the start know that what is acceptable and what is not. Moving on to the next slide. Ethical focus every day. So companies should regularly communicate with their employees about acceptable behavior. It should not just be at the beginning of a company or at the beginning of when an employee joins a company. It should be ongoing, right? They should check to make sure that the code of ethics are being followed. Check in with different departments. Create a hotline for anonymous reporting. Reporting can be an issue because people might be afraid to report some unethical behavior because they're afraid that they will be retaliated against. It's actually a law that companies cannot retaliate against employees who report unethical behavior. However, that doesn't mean companies will not retaliate. So an anonymous hotline is very important. And have ongoing ethical training for employees, right? Not just, again, at the beginning of when they get hired, but continuously. You know, this is something that happened at Wells Fargo a few years ago when actually, because they failed to review their ethical conducts and behaviors and what's acceptable, pretty much everybody from top CEO down the line to the tellers they all have used or displayed unethical behavior, and it became a large scandal. We will talk about that in our discussions as well later. Next slide. You and business ethics. What can you do? How can you affect businesses? Well, you have choices. First of all, you should always examine your own ethical behavior. Are you doing the right thing? It's, you know, when you're in front of a decision where you're wondering which way to go, always examine your ethical standards and don't be tempted to go against your standards just because there's a large reward if you did so. That would be kind of going after instant gratification. Oh, you get something big if you do this little bit of thing that might not be the right thing, but long term, you're going to lose if you're not ethical, right? Who you do business with, you have a choice who you buy from most of the time, right? There are certain companies I don't do business with because I don't approve of their ethical standards or of their beliefs, right? So I don't want to support those companies. I want to spend my money with companies that are more ethical. And then who do you invest in? Same thing about if you have money to invest, where do you put it? Do you put it into companies that you feel good about, or do you use it for companies that you would not agree what they do just because they make a lot of money, right? And who you work for. Sometimes, not all the time, especially not right now, but sometimes we have choices who we work for, right? You really want to work for a company that shares your ethical standards and beliefs. You're not going to be happy long-term at a company that goes against your ethical standards. So that's something else that you can examine, and you have choices. Okay, so what's next? Now I would like you to examine the following organizations and their ethical standards. Have these organizations been subject to any ethical scandals? If so, what was the outcome? Here are some of the companies that I would like you to look at: Wells Fargo, Walmart, Apple, Nike, PG&E, or any other company. You will be put together in groups during our meeting, and you will be assigned one of these, one of these companies, and or you can choose your own and just have some discussions. If you have time, feel free to go ahead and read about these companies and to see if there were any issues. So I look forward to seeing you during our meeting this week. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.